Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Finance and Accounting Show. And today we have a great guest on, and we're going to talk about a topic that it's really dramatically impacted the accounting profession and the way that we think about certain things, and that is in the area of lease accounting. Now, it may not be the area that most people are familiar with, but one of the things that we can say with the changes that have come is that it's not an easy change to navigate if you're trying to do it manually. So you need some type of system that is going to help you effectively manage and navigate this change. So we have a great guest that will be coming on, Mr. Greg Kautz, and we're going to be talking all about that and the way that he has been able to help a lot of different businesses navigate this change. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring my guest on. Greg, how are you?
Very good yourself, Terrell.
I am doing very, very well. I'm glad to be able to have you on. I'm glad that we were able to connect. I know before we got on, you were talking about your long weekend. Did you do anything special over the long weekend?
We've got a lake in Alberta here, and so we just spent some time with some family and did some water activities, and had enjoyed the sun.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, before we hop into the details of talking about, you know, the for some, it is a mystical conversation of like what's changed in lease accounting or how do I navigate it. But before we jump into that, Greg, can you give us a little bit of context and back information on your background?
Oh, glad to. Well, I started my accounting career with the Canadian Tax Agency, and when I left, I was in special investigations doing forensic auditing and criminal prosecutions. So quite a change to where I am today. Then my career moved into operational auditing. So a lot of that part of my career was focused on continuous improvement, looking for the way to optimize business controls and limit risk. So again, this is starting to flow to where we are today. And then, after that, I moved into finance executive roles. And then for prior to starting Black Owl Systems, I joined a consulting group in Canada called Lumina Management Consulting. And my focus was finance transformations, mergers and acquisitions, and ERP implementations and selection.
Awesome, awesome. Now, one of the things I'm curious about, from your early part of, like I said, of finding fraud, finding issues, and then later on transitioning into like helping people with processes and really just maximizing that efficiency. How did you find the shift of going from finding problems to then helping people actually get ahead of problems with efficiencies and transformation?
Great question. Yeah, a lot of it goes back to understanding the business process or business challenges that you're trying to deal with. And a lot of it goes back to using your skills as a finance leader, as a good accountant, is understanding where your challenges are, where your points of risk or exposure are, and then trying to optimize them. It's trying to think out of the box, look for new ideas, and then that's the best way to start for that.
Awesome. I love it. Now, another thing that one of the things we hear about from a lot of different, finance leaders who have, served in, finance leadership roles or they're leading their own organization. And, looking back, they tend to talk about how all of those roles, which at one point didn't seem to be leading them to where they are today,
Yeah.
but somehow they all work together. Now, early on in your career, was finance executive kind of the direction you wanted to head in, or was that something that just kind of unfolded as you navigated different opportunities?
It was a direction that, where I was heading to, is get into that leadership role. And that's where one of the benefits of it is you can share your knowledge and experiences with others. And then you're accountable for the change and the optimization. It's different being a part of a large entity, and then it's very different than leading the change in that entity.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. I love it. So now, one of the things that I'm curious about is, with blackout systems, I mean, what was it that, or was it even an event or something that happened that really sparked you to say, hey, you know what? I want to go out and I want to build kind of my own organization.
Well, it actually stemmed from my son, who's also a CPA, and it was his idea saying, the world needed a better lease accounting solution. So he had worked with one of the first generation competitors of ours with firm he was with, putting it in, and he just noted a lot of challenges trying to put it in. And he said he could build a bit better one. And then from my management consulting, I was hearing from my client base saying, they also had these first generation systems, and they said, they weren't meeting their needs. There's still challenges. There's still a lot of manual intervention happening. And that spurred it on, the idea. And from there, we created a prototype, and then we shopped it around with some of the CPA firms and saying, you know, do we have something? And, we got 2 thumbs up saying, yes, you definitely have something. Go for it. So that was what started it.
Awesome, awesome. Now, so when it came down to, lease accounting, for some that are listening and watching, they're a little more familiar than others, and some, they're still trying to wrap their mind around kind of lease accounting. Can you give us an idea of just kind of explaining like, what changed with lease accounting?
Glad to. So a lot of public companies, or all public companies in the United States, have already been complying with ASC 842 for the last 5 years. So it's private companies this year have to comply with the new regulations. One of the best examples I like to say, explain lease accounting and what the impact is, typically an organization, any leases, whether it's a building, equipment, aircraft, manufacturing equipment that they're leasing, would be an expense line on the income statement. It was always expense. But if you're a company that bought assets and bought everything versus leasing, your balance sheets would look different. Because if you were buying them, you would have an asset, liability, interest expense, depreciation expense. So these regulations, prompted by the regulatory agencies for managing your stock exchanges, prompted it to make it more comparable. They said, we've got to take those leases and now capitalize them. So now you're taking what used to be a line item on your income statement is now an asset, liability, depreciation, interest expense, and it makes it more comparable. But to do that in accounting is actually quite complex. And so it's something your accounting systems, your ERP can't, they're not designed to handle. And so there's a lot of complexities around that just to perform lease accounting. And for a small private company that needs to comply, who don't have the experience understanding the regulations, it's a huge challenge. And it can be quite complex if you don't have the right solution.
Awesome, awesome. Now, during that time of, you said that, public companies already transitioned. When did that transition start for kind of some of your earlier public companies?
Yeah, so they started, some adopted early before the regulations. So it was about 5 years ago where public companies had to comply. Canada, which follows IFRS, started a year before the United States with ASC 842.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, I mean, it is something that has been in the works for, when you think about public companies, like it wasn't something that they could, make a change immediately. It was something that took some time. So, with private companies, what are some of the challenges that that you're realizing that they're facing as they're trying to comply?
Yes, great questions. Well, it's Same as what public companies went through. There's first denial. Let's hope it goes away. We don't want to do it. Uh, then there's a realization. Okay, how are we going to do this? And then you can go online and Google, and you'll be bombarded with articles how to do it. And you start reading these, and you start getting overwhelmed. And then, you start thinking, well, I can do it in spreadsheets. So, the evolution is, well, we can figure it out ourselves. We can do spreadsheets and we'll figure it out. And then first year-end close happens. Auditors start looking at it and say, no, this isn't quite right. You've missed it. So there's a lot of manual intervention happening where people try themselves. And, this is going to happen with private companies as well. It's the realization we've got time to figure it out, and then it's a scramble to do it. Now, lesson learned from a lot of the public companies is, they waited too long. They tried to do it manual themselves and not realizing what is the true cost. It isn't just buying the software, it's your labor cost, it's your time, it's the time and cost of the people trying to learn it and apply those regulations.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. One of the things that I think about during like my time of working with a couple of Fortune 500 companies is one of the common trends that I saw when like a big change like this would happen is the natural reaction for a lot of people is, oh, we'll hire someone to do it, or we'll place someone there to do it. And it's just like if they didn't have the right tools, just like that person tended to struggle, or that team of people tended to struggle without the right tools. So, how are you seeing people gravitate now to utilizing tools as they've kind of realized manually doing this can be a nightmare?
I'm going to use an analogy comparing it to financial consolidations, something all of us accountants are familiar. There's people, they've got their accounting system, they can use Excel. Maybe they've went out looking for a solution. They say, geez, that's not making it much easier for us. We'll keep doing it manually. So it's the same type of thing, is finding that right solution that's designed to optimize your processes and reduce your risk, and ultimately saving time and money to the finance organization. So lease accounting is not new. It's just part of this complex accounting that we have to deal with.
Mhm. Gotcha. And I think about it from my time in work when I worked in investor relations of having to get on the phone with Wall Street analysts. And, one of the questions that we used to get, and this was probably what, 10 years ago now. One of the questions we used to get was, when looking at some of the leases, like, okay, all right, what's the term of this lease? Because they were trying to back into calculating what's like the ongoing liability that you have here. So, I mean, I can definitely see how lease accounting has a huge benefit for people who are trying to understand the financial position of the business.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So what you've done is, it's you try to look at it as, now you're not just managing it as a transaction. Now you have to manage it as an asset. So, lease accounting now is taken, should be managed the same way you manage your other assets that you've purchased. And so it's an opportunity, if I step back as a finance leader, I want to have a complete understanding of my balance sheet and how are we managing those assets. So if you have a good solution that helps you manage your assets, just like you do purchased assets, it's a great opportunity to get a better handle on that balance sheet.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, you bring up a good point about like even with the fixed assets, because I remember having to do, you know, an inventory on the fixed assets. And I remember there was one situation where something had come up where we were trying to sell off a subsidiary. And one of the questions that was asked is like, oh, okay, all right, so what lease agreements are attached to this subsidiary? And it was a nightmare because no one knew. And it was just like, where do you find that information?
Right. And well, and the same thing goes, if you think of it, if you're managing all those leases in spreadsheets and those spreadsheets get outdated, people change, And if you are larger, like you say, a Fortune 500 company, and you're allowing all your subsidiaries to manage them all separately, not in one database, it's it's very time consuming to regather that, and you may have to regather it for not for your reporting, but for maybe a merger, acquisition, a divestiture, where you've got to show what your assets and commitments are.
Mhm. Awesome. One of the things that was a eye opener also for me during that time was, that when it came down to lease renewals, where there were a ton of leases that people had just lost sight of, that had gone from they had expired past their contract term, so they were just on a month to month.
Right.
And it was after doing a deep dive that, people started asking questions like, why are we still leasing this building? Like, who's using it? Like, what is it being used for? And what it helped us realize is like not having a good handle on these didn't allow us to make smart, cash flow decisions and financial decisions. So, are you finding that as people are using software, they're able to keep an eye on those type of things a bit more?
Yeah, if they have the right solution that helps manage that. And one of the things is you want flexibility for monitoring that, because one organization may be different. So one of the things we built in is a very flexible dashboard for reporting those things where expiries are happening, other terms you're trying to monitor, and giving a notifications when that comes forward. So, as an accountant in financial reporting, you may have different you're looking through your disclosure notes, where somebody who's managing that asset is looking, hey, what's coming due in 3 months or 6 months, and start saying, hold on, we've got these assets. Now we've got the information in advance to make decisions on those.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think for anyone listening, I mean, I think that becomes having access to that data just becomes a great one, because I think a lot of people miss out on the opportunity to renegotiate some lease terms,
Right.
because they don't find out until the very last second, and then they just have to accept whatever terms they're given. It's like, that's probably not the best way to manage, the business's resources.
And it's a great way for finance to be more active in managing those assets, because now it's critical for them for the impact on the financial statements. Where before, maybe it's the commercial operations or supply chain or the one negotiating leases. Now, finance is a stakeholder in that because they know the impact and the better understanding of how it affects the company's books and records.
Awesome. Now, one of the questions that a lot of people have when it comes down to, implementing any technology is, or working with any new technology, first question is, what does the implementation look like?
And yeah, a great question. And all my years of experience prior to Black Owl, number one question, okay, like the software, what's the journey going to be like for that? So that goes where we are trying to be disruptive in what we've created for our solution. And we've done that the same for the implementation. We've moved where typically people would have in the back end configuration, setting up companies, loading the company's GL accounts. We've moved it to a front end just to streamline that implementation. So basically, we could give you, once security set up, a system, and the user could take over and start loading all their master data, all their configuration decisions, so it aligns to their ERP, and they can start loading leases. So, from a timeline, we're talking a small organization, you can be up and running within less than a month. Larger organizations where you've got more IT involved, more change management, more governance, it's going to take longer to do those type of things. But the core system being set up and ready to go is something that's foundational with our system.
Wow. I would say that is impressive, because I would say, having lived through a couple system implementations or add-ons to different systems, a month is a pretty efficient time frame for a smaller organization, because some of those just tended to linger on and on.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, when it comes down to, you spoke a little bit about like some of the integrations for the solution that Black Owl provides. you know um does it have specific types of ERP systems that they tend to interact well with, or does it really do a really good job of interacting with just pretty much probably mostly all your major ERP systems?
Yeah, so it'll work with any accounting system or ERP. Our outbound is journal entries that need to be booked. So it can be in Excel format, CSV, or if the client wants, we can integrate it to their ERP with an upload. But so many ERP systems, let's say SAP, each client may have a different upload tool, or they may have a different way they're leveraging their APIs. So, with our design and flexibility, we can accommodate any ERP system to get that information in.
Okay, awesome. Now, one of the things that becomes very common for a lot of accounting and finance professionals is even when they're using a tool, one of the questions that usually comes up is, well, do I have the ability to download the data from the tool into a spreadsheet? Do,
Oh,
do you
yeah.
hear that often?
Oh, we're accountants. Of course, we want to see that. So, I talked about, the journal entries that come out, definitely. And one of the things with our system is when we create a new lease, we create all the journal entries from inception to end. So you've got the entire life of the journal entries. And this is great for validating. Once you put in a lease, you can drop that into a spreadsheet. You can, make sure it totals zero at the end, the debits and credits. And it's a great opportunity. And then as well, any lease schedules, all the reports, it's a click of the button and it drops into Excel, especially when you're talking about your disclosure reports and notes. You want to manipulate that. We'll give you the out of the box reports, but may not be in the format you want. So it's downloadable. And then for your audit trails, completely downloadable of all the journal entries. So as I say, we create them from inception to end. You've got your entire audit trail from current, past to future sitting there ready.
Awesome, awesome. I bet that the all of the users of the system, love that feature, because I think that's one of the challenges that some software systems have, where it's like that the specifics of what you need it for. There may be some tweaks that you need to make, and to
Mhm.
where if you don't have that feature of being able to manipulate it some to fit what you need, people tend to find it difficult to fully adopt that system.
Right. Yes.
Mhm.
No,
So,
exactly right.
so one of the questions that a lot of people may have is, okay, and love everything that I'm hearing, love the things that you're discussing. Where can they find you guys online?
You would just go to our website, blackowlsystems.com, and reach out. There's various ways. Our email is there. You can book a demo, you can send in an information request, or you can find us on LinkedIn or find myself and send me a note.
Awesome, awesome. Now, one of the things I see that you have on there, some of the articles. How often are you guys posting articles on your website?
We're trying to at least once a month get something. So that's a combination of articles and news announcements with some of our partnerships that we've had and alliances. One of our ones is Pricewaterhouse Canada. We have a joint business relationship with them. We've got implementation partner in Canada. We're a couple in the United States. We're signing up a few more who want to be resellers and implementation partners for us, and they come from the ERP ecosystem. So they have experience putting in financial systems, and they have accountants who understand lease accounting.
Awesome, awesome. So when it comes down to, some of the feedback that you've heard from, companies and clients that have implemented the Black Owl systems, what's been some of the feedback or the common kind of customer reviews that they've shared about, their experience with the system?
The first thing is always it's easy to use. They love the design, the logical workflows. That's probably the number one feedback. And we spent a lot of time working on that design. And then, the other thing is the power we have for our changes. So if you're doing a reassessment, impairments, betterments, all of that, it's so easy to use with our system. And it goes back to our core design again, is, we use modern technologies to make that so streamlined for the user experience.
Awesome, awesome. Now, also, if people are attending different conferences, do you guys usually do exhibits at different
No, we haven't yet. We're starting out. We attended the AICPA conference where we were both attending Engage this year in Vegas, and we were there scoping out the booths, and eventually we will start being attending those.
Okay, awesome. Now you mentioned about the AICPA Engage. Love to get your thoughts on what did you think about the event? What was a some of the big takeaways from you from the AICPA Engage 2022 in Vegas?
It was a great event. It was nice seeing so many accountants there. And one of the things is everyone there was wanting to learn. You attended those conferences, people weren't there just to get their professional development hours. What a lot of people have been doing online, the cameras are off and, they're clicking the answers. People were engaged using the name of the conference. Lease accounting, I think, was a very hot topic where people were hoping for private companies that was it going to be deferred again? And the answer was no. And what surprised me is so many companies weren't ready yet or hadn't started thinking about it. But there's a lot of great topics, great people there attended, and it was just, I'll do it again.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, one question I always love asking every guest that comes on is, based on what you've learned and what you understand about lease accounting, just the experience of it, the transition and the benefits of using a system like this, what's two pieces of advice that you would share with business owners and finance leaders that are trying to figure out a solution for lease accounting?
Number one is talk to people. Talk to the CPA firms that you work with, get ideas, but get varying ideas. Just don't listen to one person. Reach out, learn as much as you can. And one of the other things is don't always think you can do it in Excel. Be always open to maybe there's a better way to do it.
I love it. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the show today. It was a pleasure having you.
Well, it was a pleasure having this chat with you, Terrell.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Finance and Accounting Show. If you like what you heard, don't be selfish. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and then share this with a friend because you know a business owner that could definitely use this insight. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and turn on the notification bell so you get all the updates